And Danny Money of CanesInSight.com. Danny, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing quite well. Now, let me start with the basketball team, which suffered its first ACC loss this past weekend against Wake Forest. Now, they bounced back last night and beat Virginia Tech. Those two games, they are what they are. Were you going to go undefeated through the ACC? That's a great accomplishment, but teams don't normally do that. Bottom line is this. Saturday, they got a huge game at Cameron Indoor Stadium. In my young lifetime, in regards to Miami Hurricane basketball, this feels like the biggest game ever for the university.
I think that's accurate. The nation's going to be watching. They'll probably be watching to see how Duke reacts after the first game. So the national attention will be on Miami. The first time, it's still kind of an upset. People didn't really know how good Miami was. So now they know they're dealing with two powerhouse teams this year. So, yeah, I think it is the biggest game in history, and it was a good bounce-back win against Virginia Tech and a good wake-up call against Wake Forest. I think the attitude going into the Duke game will actually be pretty good, considering that they'll be confident knowing that they handled Duke so well the first time. But at the same time, it's still Miami playing Duke at Duke, so I doubt you're going to see any overconfidence creep in. So I think they'll have a great mindset, and it should be a great game.
When you go back and look at that game from a couple weeks ago, it was a stretch there in the early part of the first half where Miami just completely had Duke out of sync, forced a bunch of turnovers, and then were able to turn those turnovers into points. Going into Cameron Indoor, how aggressive do you expect them to be given the environment that they're having to play in there? Do you think that they take that aggressor role again, or do you think they step back and play a little more passively as they're going into an intimidating environment?
No, I think they have to. That's the way they play. That's the way Coach L coaches. And I really think they have a big advantage at the guard position in terms of athleticism. Shane Larkin was blowing by the Duke backcourt in the first game. The Durant Scott, very athletic player, very athletic defender. So that's Miami's advantage, and that's really the way Miami plays. So I think it would certainly be a mistake to go in there with any other kind of attitude. And I do think they'll go in there aggressive, confident, but at the same time, going to play Duke at Cameron Indoor is always going to be a big game. So they're going to go in there extremely hyped. And I think they will go in there trying to throw the first punch, no question.
Danny, this team being the Cinderella team, and I know we're closer to it here in the state of Florida, but I love everything they're doing, from the coach, how he's adjusted, everybody's adjusted to him, how they're winning ball games late in the game and finishing strong. But how that has a definite effect on a city. And you think of the vastness of Miami and kind of being the melting pot of the South. What kind of positive influence does it have? And plus, what kind of positive influence does it have on Al Golden and the football team with spring practice right around the corner?
It's funny. I always thought of Miami as kind of the ultimate football city besides Pittsburgh, not in terms maybe of fan support, but as far as putting the most high school players in the NFL. Miami high schools have more players in the NFL than anybody. Fort Lauderdale and West Palm not far behind. As far as Pop Warner, they always win the national championship. Then you have a college football program that's won 5 national championships, and then one of the more popular NFL franchises in the Miami Dolphins. So really, not many cities have that kind of football tradition. But obviously, it hasn't been so great the past decade. Both the Dolphins and the Canes have struggled, so it's really becoming a basketball city. You see the Miami Heat, the world champions, probably the most popular professional franchise outside of soccer in the world, considering how much success they have in China and elsewhere. And then you have the Miami basketball program. So it's really generated a lot of momentum for the sport of basketball. The high schools are producing a little more talent. So I think it's a great thing. And as far as Coach Golden, he signed 2 premium football prospects that also play basketball and intend to play on the Hurricanes basketball team. So it's having a tangible effect.
Cool. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest here on the SportsFix. And Danny, I want to enjoy this year, no question about it. But when you look at the amount of seniors on this squad, now Shane Larkin's a young guy. He's going to be back. What about the future for Miami basketball? Is the future bright, or is this kind of maybe, I hate to say, maybe a one-hit wonder because you do have so many seniors? It's such a senior-laden basketball team.
Well, I was always worried about the future because of the NCAA sanctions. I thought they were going to be worse for the basketball than for maybe other sports, but it looks like the basketball allegations are pretty thin. So that's one huge hurdle that was crossed. And there's some good recruits in the pipeline. So a couple of good guards, 4-star guards coming in this year. I mentioned Corn Elder and Derek Griffin, who are 2 football players that are also top 150 players. They'll probably play basketball. And really, the ingredients for a good recruiting program are here in terms of the on-campus arena, and then just the fact that young kids want to be in Miami. There's not as much local talent as there is for football, but in recruiting national kids, there's a lot of appeal. So with a little more, with the success this year, and if Coach L can stick around, I can see this being not maybe a powerhouse recruiter, but a strong recruiting program going forward because the ingredients are there.
Let's turn our attention to football, and unfortunately, it seems like every couple days there's more information that comes out in regards to the Nevin Shapiro investigation, and this week we heard some of the allegations at the University of Louisville there in terms of Clint Hurt. When does all this get put behind Miami, in your opinion? It just this leaking of information and kind of meandering through this entire process seems to be dragging on, and I know that at Miami all they want is to get some sort of resolution and get this behind them at this point.
I think no later than October, which is extremely late, obviously, but I think that's the max that we're looking at. But the NCAA has shown signs that they're trying to speed up the process, and this is, when I say NCAA, I'm speaking of the presidents, the Committee on Infractions, not necessarily the enforcement branch, which is the part of the NCAA that's been under fire lately for the way they've conducted the investigation. So I think everybody's interested in moving this along as quickly as possible. The NCAA doesn't want it to linger because it's a sore on them, too, at this point. So I think most realistically September, but October is a possibility, and maybe even earlier. But that's about what time it'll wrap up. And I think the momentum of the program will depend on how the football team's doing. Miami goes and beats a team like Florida, has a soft early schedule aside from the Gators. Then they're sitting in a pretty good position nationally, and like you said, they'll have this behind them. So I think as far as the program goes, they're focused on getting ready to get ready for the season. And the second week, go up there or go down here and beat the University of Florida, and like you said, move on to the next phase.
Danny, you look at this thing. I mean, here it is, the last day of February. March begins tomorrow, and then you look up here in Gainesville. A week from yesterday, spring practice will start. And I know they're excited down there in Miami about what's going on and spring practice right around the corner. But when is the pro day? When does spring practice officially start at Miami?
It starts tomorrow. But there's the first couple of days, as you know, is not going to be too intensive in terms of getting that much work in. But it's starting this weekend, and there'll be a spring break right in the middle of spring practice, and then they'll come in for the spring game in mid-April. So they're rearing to go. They're getting ready. We have about 6 kids from the recruiting class already on campus, ready to compete. A lot of them are from prep school or junior college, so they're coming in with the expectation that they're going to compete for jobs. And the team, as of now, is fairly healthy. Now it's going to be a key for them to avoid any serious injuries in the spring because depth in the front seven is a huge concern. But everybody's excited. The coaches have been working overtime trying to translate Coach Coley's playbook into the terminology that Jet Fish used to ease the transition for the players. That's one thing they said is that, it's going to be easy for the players, but it's hard for the coaches because we're going to be the ones that have to translate it. So that's what they're focused on, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And I know everybody's excited.
Danny Money, CanesInSight.com, our guest here on the SportsFix. And Danny, we're less than a month removed from National Signing Day. I know that a lot of Miami Hurricane fans, the idea of early commitments, guys that commit almost a year before signing day, hadn't necessarily been the best of things for the university. But they got a couple. We talked about Alan Edward, a couple of weeks ago. Now they've flipped a kid from Florida State and Joseph Yerby, a talented running back from Miami Central High School. Talk about his commitment, and then in maybe both of these guys' cases, are these guys you expect or believe will be signing with the University of Miami come next February?
I do. And last year at this time, Miami got 3 commitments. J-Ron Kirsch, Javon Kirsch's nephew from Southwest Florida, Keith Bryant from Delray Beach, and then Alex Collins from Plantation. And even then, people suspected that these guys might not be the most solid commitments. Just the way they answered questions in their interviews, kind of their personality, learning more about their background. You could tell that they were, they were different kinds of kids, and you could tell they liked the attention, and there was going to be some drama involved. When you follow this recruiting enough, and it's pretty sick how close we follow these, the recruitment of these 17, 18-year-old kids, you get a sense, and I think even then people knew that those three kids were going to be a tough battle, and ultimately none of them signed with Miami. Yerby and Edward, I think, are different. Edward's a quarterback. Quarterbacks typically don't decommit unless a coach leaves, and Edward's already recruiting people for Miami. He's from Miami. His dreams to play here. I think that's a solid commitment. Yerby's not really big in the recruiting process. He doesn't get him any interviews, doesn't really talk that much, but he has a very close relationship with James Coltley, the new offensive coordinator who recruited him at FSU. So I think that's gonna stand tall. And based on his comments, he's not taking any visits. He's completely done with recruiting. And you never know. But I think those two are more solid than what Miami was looking at this time last year.
Hey, Danny, real quick final question for you. Coach Scott, the gentleman from USF, reportedly is going to be the guy who comes in there and is the tight ends coach for the University of Miami. My question is, the role that was vacated by Hurley Brown, have they filled that role yet, or is that still one they're interviewing guys for?
No, and that's actually a great question. Hurley Brown was really an asset to the program in that role. Did a great job of getting kids qualified. I think only one kid didn't qualify last year at about 33, which is remarkable. He had a lot to do with that just from an administrative standpoint, staying on top of everything and making sure that everything was as it should be. That role hasn't been filled. Hurley now is the running back coach and is hitting the ground running in that regard. You mentioned the commitment of Joseph Yerby. So that is going to be a key role going forward, and hopefully the person who succeeds Hurley can do as good a job as he did, because either at the camps, the Al Golden summer camps, or just working with kids on their grades, he really did a phenomenal job.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, the best in the business, talking Miami Hurricane sports. As always, Danny, appreciate your time, my friend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care, guys. Appreciate
it. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com. Coming up next, remember, Irish Schofel will not be with us. We'll take a look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, and I got a beef with Joe Lunardi. I'll tell you why. Coming up next, you're listening to the Sports Fix on ESPN Radio.